Hi guys, welcome back to another video, or your first video here, I don't know. Welcome if you're new here, and welcome either way. This is going to be my July wrap-up, which I mistakenly thought I'd already filmed, so hence why it's a bit late. It's already mostly into August. But anyway, I have quite a number of books to talk to you about, pretty much all throughout the rating spectrum as well. Starting off with a lot of DNFs. I think there were sort of two things leading to that. The first of all being, I really didn't know what I was in the mood for. I kept on thinking I was in the mood for a certain thing. And then when I was seeking out that thing, I was like, oh, I don't really like this, or that doesn't really work for me. Although I think all of these are permanent DNFs. The other thing that I think is contributing to the sheer number of them is that I was looking at my comic section of my shelves and was like, this is ridiculous, there's way too many of them. I just pick up comics when I see them in charity shops because I don't like buying them full price. I'm finished with them way too fast to warrant paying practically the price of a full-length novel at the bookshop, so I do just pick them up. And many of them I pick up just whatever volume is there, probably not volume 1, and because I have no idea about what it's about, I have no intention of, like, the plan of when I'm going to pick up volume 1. So, with a lot of these, I went on the internet and just found like a taster or a couple of chapters so that I could try it out, and I didn't continue with any of them. But that does mean that I am narrowing down my shelves into what I actually want to read. So let's just go through the DNFs first. So this first book, Swallows and Amazons, fits into the former category. Oh, I didn't really know what I was in the mood for. I tried this out and I realised that this is something that I want to have read rather than I want to actually read. I didn't realise how young the book leaned. I mean, I should have known from the enormous text and the occasional picture. Oh, there we go. There's some pictures in here. Where'd it go? Anyway, I'm sure this is very, very good, but I think it would have meant more to me if I had read this as a child, so I'm passing this one along. This one falls into the latter category, so I have here Psych Academy Volume 2, but I'll hold this up because I don't own Volume 1. I tried this out. I thought, I mean, I couldn't tell you what it was about, really. I didn't read enough, but I thought that the art style was really sloppy. I think that the characters were so weirdly proportioned. It felt so rushed. It didn't feel like any care had gone into the art or the story, and it felt very generic, so I gave up on this one. Next, I have Gothic Sport. Again, I don't have Volume 1, so I'm just going to hold up Volume 3. This one was about a girls' football team, and this one, the art was fine, but what really did it for me was the really flat characterization. I thought people were very stereotypical. I thought everyone was actually really one-dimensional, and it must have come out in that time where sports manga were really, really popular, and I don't think it brought anything new to the table, so this one's going. Next, I have Amulet. Now, this is volume 2 or 3? This is volume 3. I found volume 1 online, and this one, I think that from that one to this one, there is clearly a marked improvement in the art, but I didn't quite realise how young this was going to lean before I actually bought it. And also I found the storytelling quite clunky, and I didn't want to sort of push myself through those earlier volumes to get to, say, these later volumes when there's clearly a marked improvement in the story and the art style. But I'm sure this is very good. I just didn't want to continue to it, so bye-bye. Next, I have Air Gear. I tried volume 1, this is volume 2, and yet again, very generic, didn't really pull me in. The art style was fine, and yeah, I'm never going to think about this again. With a lot of these, I'm sorry, I'm not really going through what they're about. That's because I don't know, I didn't read enough to find out about it. Next one here is roughly the same, and that is Rose and Maiden. This one I'm a bit disappointed by. Not disappointed in the book, just disappointed in the fact that I didn't like it. Because I think of all the comics that I tried out in July, I think this one had the highest potential for it to be something that I liked because of its darker undertones. I really wish it got darker faster, I think that, I mean, at least for my taste, that would have been something that really hooked me. I also really like the art style in here. The problem I had though was with the plot and the story. It felt like we were dropped in mid-scene. It didn't feel like we had much of a setup at all, and I just didn't care enough to continue to find out because I was very, very confused. And yeah, I'm sad. This one, I have remembered nothing since filming my unhaul, but this is NG Life. This is volume 6. I know that I tried reading volume 1 to see if I wanted to continue on with this series, and I cannot remember a thing about it. I couldn't remember a thing about it a month ago, and nothing has resurfaced. So it's clearly just so generic that I didn't even think of giving this another go. It was just meh. I did enjoy things this month, I promise. Get through the DNFs fast. Anyway, this is Not So Bad, volume 2. Again, I tried volume 1 online, and for me it was the art style that really made me give up on this. I really didn't like it. I thought that it was very sort of sketchy, and I think the art style in this volume is slightly better, but yeah, the art style in the first one really turned me off. I did want to give this a go, or this came onto my radar because it's gay, and I do try and pick up and read as many LGBT books as possible, but yeah, this one wasn't for me. Next we have a reread, or I revisited it and in the second read DNF'd it, and that is I Ore, or Love Me, I think. And this is a book which really or a manga which really plays with gender and gender expression, and I remember really enjoying this volume, and I had been collecting the others in order to give it a go, but rereading this to try and get to the others, I couldn't get through it. I was just like, it was just too stupid. So I remember really enjoying this, but not for me. Next I have Absolute Boyfriend volume 1, and this was another one where I'd been I had the series in the back of my mind for some reason. I think someone at one point had recommended it to me, and so when I saw it on Facebook Marketplace, I picked up the entire series, stupidly. And yeah, I tried this, really didn't work for me. I think this is a sort of really silly plot. It's about essentially someone getting like a mail order boyfriend, which is really stupid. But, you know, actually thinking about the plot for any length of time, it becomes really creepy and messed up. And yeah, I should have looked more into this before buying it, and I think I've learnt my lesson in the fact that I do need to look more into what these comics are actually about before picking them up. Because that's the problem, I never know what I'm going to like. There are so many comics coming out all the time, and obviously I can't read all of them or read up on all of them. And so what I end up getting is just what I end up seeing. And there are some things I've never heard of before and end up being one of my favourite things of all time. So I do like the fact that I do just give things a go, but I think I need to cut it back a little bit, especially if I'm not actually reading them. The next DNF I have is Tintin. This is volume 2. I tried out volume 1. This, obviously I've heard great things about, but I just could not get into the art style, and there were certain things that were just making me a bit uncomfortable. I thought, these things didn't age very well. So I'm sure that other people will really enjoy these volumes, and I'm going to be passing them along, but no, this is about a boy who is a detective and his dog. And I know I have some more DNFs, but I know that I don't actually own them. Let's have a look. Okay, so the last comic, because I think I was really trying to give comics a go in this month. Clearly this is what I thought I was like in the mood for, was Chef's Kiss. And again, I probably put this on my list because of the fact that it hit the bar of being gay or being LGBT. And I didn't really like this. I didn't really like any of the characters. It just didn't work for me. Honestly, having tried it out probably over a month ago now, it's very fast leaving my brain, so I can't remember much about this. But yeah, not remarkable for me. The next one was a poetry collection called We Want It All, and I think this is the only one that might not be a permanent DNF. So this is a collection of poetry and short prose by a bunch of different authors. And recently I've been trying to get more into poetry. I've been really interested in just seeing what's out there and trying stuff out, because there are some poetry I do really enjoy. However, being a very literal person, a lot of poetry I read goes over my head entirely. I just don't understand what it's trying to say, and unfortunately a lot of poetry in here fell under that category. There were some really, really powerful poems in this collection, but there were just so many that I was kind of skipping over because of the fact that I wasn't really understanding, that I felt I didn't really want to continue. I'll have a think about it. I might be returning to that one. And then I thought to myself, okay, so I want something light and sort of not brain taxing, but comics aren't really working for me at the moment, so let's just go with some young adult novels, and those didn't really work out either. So the last two DNFs I have are both sort of lighter young adult novels that I tried because I thought I was in the mood. So the first one being Boyfriend Material. This one felt like it was trying to be Red, White and Royal Blue and just didn't feel as good as that story, so I gave up on that one. And the next one was When We Were Magic. I think this is by Sarah Gailey. You'll be seeing the correct author up on the screen now. But I was interested in this one, but I just didn't like the writing style. There are some other Sarah Gailey books I think I'd enjoy more, but it was following this sort of group of girls, and it was trying to give away too many of the dynamics too quickly, and it was trying to really spell it out. It was like, this person and this person were doing this person had this reaction, this person always does this person always has this argument with this person. We always know, like, it was, I really didn't like the way the dynamics were being laid out for you, so I ended up giving up on this one, although I am still interested in this author's other work. And with that, we are 15 minutes into the video. We are finally done with all the DNFs this month. I swear I did enjoy some things, but like I said, I read things all over the star rating system. Now I'm going to get into my 1 stars. So I continued with My Dad Wrote a Porno podcast, and I ended up finishing volumes 3 and 4 of the Belinda Blinked series, which is the porno in question that is being read out in this podcast. And I continually give all the actual books 1 star. The podcast is great, but the actual books are terribly written. The characters are so odd, that their interactions are so odd, and I honestly don't know how this author went about these stories thinking that they were erotic in any way. There are some scenes that are just utterly nauseating to read, but yeah, I'm continuing to enjoy the podcast, so that's what that is. And that's it for the 1 stars. I also only have 1 2-star, which is good, and that is another comic called Sick. Now, unfortunately, and this is probably why I put it in the 2-star category, because it was very forgetful, I cannot remember a single thing about this. I know it was gay, which is why I picked it up, and it was probably very generic, so it's good to try it out, but I don't remember anything about it. It clearly wasn't very good. So I do have some 3 stars. The next one is another comic that became on my radar because it was gay, and that is The Cat Proposed. This one, I think I leveled out as a 3. It wasn't so much that it was just generic all the way through. There were some things that I actively really enjoyed about it, like the lore and the family dynamics and the art style, and there were some things that I actively didn't like about it. I think that there were a couple of miscommunication things and characters hiding things from each other that I didn't really like, and a couple of generic tropes that just kind of turned me off it. So I've landed as a 3. I think it was okay. And the next 3 stars, again, with these comics, I can't really give you much about the plot because 1, they haven't stuck super deep in my mind, and 2, they're very easy to go in without knowing much. It really picks up, so if this looks interesting to you, you might want to pick it up. And my next 3-star is Relatively Speaking by Alan Ayckbourn. So this is a play I read with a few friends, and this was a play that was out of a stack of 3 that a friend of mine had been given as possibilities to direct. So we decided to read through this one because we knew Alan Ayckbourn already. Alan Ayckbourn wrote Table Manners, which is a play that I really enjoy. I've acted in it and is very, very clever. So we were like, oh, you know, he can clearly pull something like that off. Let's try this one. And we all really didn't like it. Like, again, I've given a 3, but the characterization was really flat, although with this one I think it would be kind of fun to play around with some of the characters and really make them your own. But as in, like, what's on the page, that was really flat. The plot didn't really do much for me, and some of it really hasn't aged well. So Alan Ayckbourn's plays often centre around miscommunication and cheating, and he's one of the few authors where, even though he has those tropes in it, I find them often very funny. And there were some funny moments in here, but there was so much else going on around it that I was like, yeah, it's not really holding my attention, or it's just aged very badly. There was one particular character, and just the way he spoke about women and, like, his almost preconceived idea that he had, like, ownership over women depending on how they dress, and just, it was just a bit really gross to read. And yeah, those things just haven't aged well, and I'm glad you didn't pick it to actually direct, because it doesn't sound very fun. So next I have a little interim category, and that is 3.5 stars. Oh, I just showed the book, so you probably know what it is. So I have The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and I gave this 3.5 stars. This was, how to explain? This was a really enjoyable read at the time while I was reading it, but in terms of the crafting of the story, it was very clear that Matt Haig had messages that he wanted to put across. So it's very obvious from the very beginning what is going to go down and how the book is going to end. And it's not really shocking in any way. And he's very, very heavy-handed with the messages. It feels more like, not a cautionary tale, but like a fable with a moral at the end, I guess. So I couldn't give it very high. I mean, it's not trying to be shocking, but it's probably what I wanted out of it. And again, I haven't told you what this is about. Essentially, this follows a woman who has decided to end her life. She feels like no one needs her in her life. She's made too many mistakes, and she is frozen in time at the moment of ending her life. She ends up at this place called the Midnight Library, and she is able to visit other versions of her lives if she could undo certain mistakes that she feels she has made. And the plot goes on from there, and how you would expect the plot to go on. So, enjoyable read, but I thought it was fine. I'm not going to reread it. I'll be passing this along. So now on to some 4 stars, which I definitely really enjoyed. So I'm just going to go through some poetry collections first, just because they don't have a plot, I don't necessarily remember a bunch about the plot, but I thought these were really excellent collections. I thought they were very moving and talked about a lot of really interesting topics while not being so over your head that you have to have someone explain to you about the poetry. So I have If My Body Could Speak and Shame is an Ocean I Swim Across. Both of these I thought were really excellent. Also, I think to bridge poetry to prose, I have another 4 star. And that is Cece's Verses, a very short little book I picked up in Vienna about this figure, Empress Elizabeth, and the poetry that she read. While I was going through the Cece Museum, something that really struck me was her prose and her poetry. A lot of it was put up on the walls of the museum. So when we were in the gift shop, I decided to try and find a book of her poetry. This was what I could find that wasn't essentially a novelization of her life, but in English. This does toe the line between having a lot of the key poetry in there, but also explaining more about her life and talking about her as a person. And I thought this was done very, very well. But I would be interested to pick up more poetry from her because I really liked her voice and writing style and opinions. Next, another non-fiction, this time about fungi. Very eclectic this month, I know. And that is Entangled Life. I've heard really great things about this. I actually mistook it for another book a while ago and I thought I'd already read it, but I hadn't. And this essentially goes through really interesting research about fungi and what we've learned from them, but also what we can do with fungi going into the future. And it followed someone who was really charismatic and really interesting to read from in terms of actually narrating the different findings. So if you're just interested in science but want an easier read, I think this was a really great book. And I think that unlike a lot of the sort of biology non-fiction that I pick up, this had a very hopeful tone to it. So if that's what you want rather than like depressing climate science, then I think this is a really great book. And the last 4 stars I have to talk to you about are from the author of My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. Now, this is a book that's essentially a memoir, but I found this, despite the really basic art style, I found this really raw and honest, so I decided to pick up a couple of other of her books. Yeah, despite the fact that her art style looks very childish, the topics that she talks about, they're not for children, they are for adults. But I read My Solo Exchange Diary Volume 1 and Volume 2, and I read My Alcoholic Escape from Reality. So the My Solo Exchange Diaries are basically moments from her life that she learned something or wants to learn something or wants to learn something from her experience, and they are posed as letters to herself, and I really enjoyed it. And My Alcoholic Escape from Reality is when she went through alcohol poisoning, and I think that her work tends to be very raw. She tends to be very open and honest with the reader, and also she goes through the process of what it's like for so much of her life to be out there in memoir form and how that has affected her relationships with the people around her, and I thought these were really interesting. And to finish up, I have my 1 5-star of the month, and that is When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. So I read and really enjoyed The Empress of Salt and Fortune by the same author. She writes these like fairy tale-esque stories that sound like they should be classic fables, and it's just fantastic. So this one follows the same cleric Chi who sort of collects and stores stories, and she is on a mission, but her and her companion get trapped, and when these tigers come down the mountain, they want to eat the group. But she manages to get around that by saying, I want to tell you this story about this tiger that we know. This was almost a commentary on stories and how they evolve depending on who's telling them and what agenda they have, and the way in which things can be interpreted, because the tigresses also have a version of this story which is very different. So they sort of both tell the story in tandem, which I thought was really interesting. And this is so short, I can't really go into much detail beyond that, but her books are very queer, very inclusive, but also beautifully told and beautifully written. Not all the characters are necessarily human, but it doesn't feel like a child story. It feels very much like, although saying that, there are so many fairy tales that when you look at their original counterparts, they're bloody and, were for children, but they're really scary and dark. So, who knows? I guess you could class this as a children's story, I don't know. But there you have it. Those are all the books that I read / DNF, or DNF most of them, I guess, in the month of July. I really hope you've been having a good reading month. I'd love to hear about it, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye.